Sea of Stars is a pretty well-known indie game made by Savage Large Studios. There are so many aspects I see that people love about the game, I myself being one of the people who absolutely just adore the game so very much. However, I have noticed one critique about the game that I just don't agree with at all. This critique is that the characters in Sea of Stars don't have any personality. While it's definitely okay to have your own opinion, it's just one I completely disagree with. As throughout the game, there are so many things that tell you about each character's personality and why they act the way they do. So with this, I am here today to tell you that the Sea of Stars characters do have character. I'm gonna give a short explanation for Sea of Stars, or not even an explanation, just some details I think you should know, because I'm assuming you've played Sea of Stars, or at the very least taken interest in it if you've clicked on this video, but just in case you're neither of those things for some reason, here's a quick little rundown of things you should know. The protagonists are Valeer and Zhain, who are solstice warriors. Valeer has the power of the moon, while Zhain has the power of the sun. Garl, Sarai, Roshan, and Beast are characters on your team that you get to play as, and are just, not NPCs. Garl is a longtime friend of our protagonist. The main bad guy of the game is called the Fleshmancer, and he makes these big creatures called Dwellers. The Dwellers, if left alone for too long, will become world eaters and destroy the world. Dwellers are weak to solstice magic from lunar and solar eclipses, where the solstice warriors will use their magic to fight them. This is what our protagonists of Valeer and Zhain have been training for all their lives. One of the biggest complaints I see about the characters in Sea of Stars is that the leads of the game, Valeer and Zhain, have no personality. So the first thing I want to clear up with them or whatever is that it is stated by their best friend Garl that Valeer and Zhain don't talk very much or are somewhat socially awkward because they've been locked up in a school for 10 years of their life during a key developmental stage, going from kids to teenagers or whatever, probably young adults, honestly. Basically, the reason they don't talk much is because they've only had each other for years, and they have a very hard time with social interactions when it comes to anybody else. So this is the explanation in the first area of the game, outside of the island where you first start the game, which is Moon Cradle Island, or the town of Moon Cradle, if you want to say. Before this, you see them as kids full of balanced energy, and are excited to go to Zenith Academy for their Solstice Warrior training. Something that they didn't, expect to take years of their life. This is the part of the game you play through first, so you immediately get shown what their personalities were like. And not much later, in terms of an RPG game, you get shown their new, socially awkward personalities. So in short, what I'm trying to say is that the game immediately shows and explains to the player why older Valeer and Zhain act the way they do. It's because they were locked up in a school that's in the sky for 10 years and immediately being put to work. So of course they're not going to talk much or, have much personality when it comes to talking to other people. So another thing that combats the claim of Valeer and Zhain having no personality, and, mainly what I'm here to say, is that throughout the game, they're shown to be much more laid back with each other, especially when they get the time to relax. You see them acting much more open and expressive with their thoughts and feelings, where Valeer is shown to be upfront with her thoughts, and Zhain, depending on the situation, either being more goofy and laughing or showing his more fearful side. This is mainly shown at the conversation that takes place in the first stage of grief in the town of Lucent, where they're waiting for their friend Garl to wake up after they saved him from a Dweller attack. And this time, Valeer and Zhain tease each other for all those silly little things they said as children, where they're shown to be more playful with each other. Then they start talking about their prophecies by the Elder Mist. When talking about this, Valeer is shown to be more go with the flow, as she knows that when the time comes for her prophecy to be fulfilled, she'll be able to do it. However, this moment, Zhain shows his uncertainty about his prophecy, and how he believes he might have felt it when Garl nearly died, but he didn't have the strength to let it in from the fear of it overwhelming him, which is a contrast to Valeer's personality, where she is pretty much fearless and open to whatever happens because she knows she could conquer whatever comes her way. This brings up another point of how people say that Valeer and Zhain have the same personality. Agree that Zhain and Valeer have very similar personalities, however, it's not the same. While both have many similarities, such as their determination in defeating Dwellers and being socially awkward, they also have just as many differences. As I've previously mentioned, Valeer is much more lean back and upfront with how she feels, whereas Zhain is definitely slightly more timid and anxious in certain times, but still often expressive and in a good mood, judging by how much she laughs. While Valeer may be more upfront, Zhain has a way harder time hiding his distress during difficult times, whereas Valier shows her more intense emotion through anger. A moment where this can be seen is when Gall takes a hit from the Fleshmancer to protect Valier and Zhain. While I'm about to mention has been changed in updates of the game, I still think it stands valid to my argument when it comes to defending Zhain and Valier's personality. In this moment, Zhain immediately rushes over to Gall and feels what he thinks is his prophecy again, and this is confirmed by the Elder Mist, who speaks through his mind and tells him to let this feeling in. In this moment, Zhain tells Valier how they need to take Gall to the Elder Mist, who at this point fly across the world. When Valier says this is impossible, we immediately see break and start to sob, as he says something along the lines of, the distance not being so far if they fly away. After this, Zhain unlocks his power and flies Gall to the Elder Mist. The reason I say this has been changed is because during this moment, Zhain's crying portrait was for some reason patched out of the game the same time when the completionist was removed. I don't know why, but still, I am going to use it to my defense. It's also a moment in the game that we see Valier attempt to beat the shit out of Forel with her staff, which to teleport out of the way, but it was a nice try. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that it shows how in moments like this, Valier will express her distress through anger first and sadness later. This is also shown during Gall's funeral, where Valier punches a tree, and Zhain sits sadly by himself. To add something random, people will usually say something like, why give us the choice of either being Valier and Zhain if it won't impact the story in any way? And what I have to say to this is that it's literally just, do you want to be the girl character, or do you want to be the boy character? It doesn't have any impact on the story, because, you know, why would they make, like, 2 separate games? So it's not that deep, really. And something else that I do want to bring up is that people say that Valier and Zhain don't have character development, which, you know, can shape their personalities, which is why I want to bring it up. So, first, we see them start out as kids wanting just to be Solstice Warriors because of how cool they think it is. Even after their training, Valier and Zhain first think that everything will be about the glory of it. However, as they learn throughout the game, people are actually suffering, and it's not about the glory of being a Solstice Warrior that makes it so important. At the very end of the game, they even acknowledge this whole adventure just isn't about themselves. Valier says, it isn't just about us anymore, take care of yourselves, showing they've realized the true importance of everything that is going on in the universe, and they are simply its protectors. Now, Valier and Zhain aren't the only characters in the game who get absolutely dogged on for their personalities, and they're far from it. So, what about the other characters? Can I make a solid defense for them? Yeah. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't be making this video. What do you think there, bud? The third character I want to talk about is Zhain. Zhain doesn't have any complaints about her in particular, but she still often gets grouped into the fact that Star's characters don't have personality. So the first thing I want to point out is that Zhain, compared to all the other characters, is that she's very cautious when it comes to trusting people. In fact, she is so cautious about it that she wears 2 costumes to conceal her identity sometimes. These costumes are her Captain Cliché outfit, when she hangs out with the pirates, and the extra clothing she wears to conceal her robotic parts. Even throughout the course of the game, she doesn't call the rest of her team friends until over halfway through the game. This is a key factor of her personality that sets her aside from the rest of the team, and reveals more of her personality in general. It reveals she fully trusts the team at this point, but it took her over half the game to reveal it. It demonstrates that Zhain takes a long time to consider the team her friends, and not just acquaintances or even just his people that she's going on the adventure with. This is something that is also made clear throughout many parts of the game, when Zhain reveals to the group that her and Captain Cliché are the same person, even though the team already knows it, because, let's be real, it was crazy obvious. What's important about this moment is that Valier states that despite already knowing who she is, it's good that Zhain can trust them. This is a moment that clearly is meant to highlight that Zhain's got some trust issues. This issue brings up what Zhain's fears are, a key part of her character. Zhain is scared of being betrayed. Now this sounds like pulling at straws, I understand, just hear me out on this one. I'm begging you. This is a more understandable detail of Zhain that is easier to miss, because it's something that stems from the betrayal of the Queen of her people when the Fleshmancer took over Zhain's world. This betrayal is most likely what led Zhain to have these trust issues. Like I said, this is an easy detail to miss, because the whole Queen That Was arc is an optional adventure, so less engaged players might miss the side quest and little personality quirk about Zhain. Another personality trait of Zhain is her brutal honesty. This trait is most shown by her interactions with Zhain, or, you know, when she's just talking about him and complaining about him to the rest of the group. She's quick to call him out on his bullshit and all of his negative aspects. I mean, he deserves it, he literally lets the worst person in the universe get away with slaughtering everyone because they dated. I'm not making that up, by the way. So from the moment you meet Zhain, Sarai makes it very clear she isn't fond of him and gets angry at him numerous times throughout the game, especially right before you acquire him to your team. She also mentions how immature he is for his age. Zhain is like 1 billion years old, by the way. This shows that Sarai is very upfront and quick-witted when it comes to saying how she feels about people, and can more easily get pissed off compared to the rest of the group. This could also be perceived as a lack of patience because she doesn't let anyone get away with things she doesn't qualify as fair, and will often immediately jump into action because of this. The time when her impatience can be seen most is when you meet Yomara, one of the 3 sisters who remains neutral in the battle between good and evil. However, you have already fought Ramaya, the evil one, by this point. This leads to Sarai immediately assuming Yomara to be evil as well, and because of this, pulls out her daggers and gets very close to attacking her. Not only does this show her impatience, but it also shows her lack of trusting people firsthand. Another thing it shows is her impulsiveness, which causes a few problems throughout the game. The most notable of this is when she reaches her limit with Zhain, and disregards the rules of his code with Aforil, as she sees Valir and Zhain struggle while fighting against the Dweller of Strife, which is the most powerful Dweller in the game, and basically there's no way that they're gonna survive. Code states that Zhain must never touch a Dweller, and if he does, then Aforil gets to her a Solstice Warrior by his own hand. However, since Sarai feels that her companions' lives are in danger, she takes Zhain's vial and hits the Dweller in the eye with it. This immediately causes Aforil to show up, and is what allows Aforil to kill Garl and transform Erlina and Brugabs into monsters. Overall, this shows how Sarai's intolerance for things she deems unfair can often lead to negative consequences. But more importantly, it presents a clear-cut moment where we see Sarai's personality stick out like a sore toe. This confirms the personality of Sarai that we've discussed this far. To recap, because I did start to ramble a little bit, I fully acknowledge that. Sarai is proven to be impatient, has difficulty trusting new people, but is upfront when she wants to express how she feels. She's also impulsive, and doesn't take any bullshit from anybody. She's also witty and irritable. However, one last thing I would like to go over about Sarai is how Sarai expresses her kindness and compassion to the others. Instead of using words of affection or support, she mainly shows it through her actions to help the team. The strongest example of this is when she uses the Coin of Undeath Record to get the ferryman to send her, Valir, and Zhain to Ramaya's estate in order to save Garl's life. If you've played through Sea of Stars, you would know that Sarai's main goal does not require Garl. It only matters that she gets Valir and Zhain to cross the Sea of Stars in order to save her world. But she still chooses to save him. Despite knowing it's taking time away from her quest to save her world, it's something that separates her from the other characters, especially Garl, who tends to support each other with their words instead of their actions. Alright, so, the next character I would like to talk about on this list is Zhain. In my opinion, Zhain doesn't even have close to the best personality, but he certainly has one. Zhain doesn't necessarily have much critique in terms of how much personality he has, but I'm still lumping him in nonetheless. And a short, sweet way to describe the personality of Zhain is a pussy. This may seem like Zhain hate, and granted, you're not far off, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of the point of his character. You're meant to hate him. Something that Zhain does is consider himself a god. So in some form, he thinks of himself as superior, even though he may not say it outright. Zhain also holds on to his feelings for people way too long. As you've heard from my previous jab at Zhain, he is basically in love with the antagonist of the game, Aforil, as they are pretty obviously very gay for each other. However, it has been like hundreds of millennia since Aforil officially gained his title as the Fleshmancer. And after he drank the potion of immortality with Zhain, according to the Messenger ARG, role-playing Discord chat where fans can interact with characters the Messenger sabotages his first game, we actually get our first appearance of Zhain and reveals that he and Aforil became immortal because they wanted to wait for a time of acceptance. To be gay, basically. I'm not lying about this, by the way, you could look it up on your own. But, to get back on track, basically, Aforil has been doing his evil shenanigans for a very long time. Now, you would think Zhain would be like, okay, maybe I don't like this guy anymore, or, you know, have the balls to put Aforil out of his misery. But no, he lets Aforil keep on doing his evil shit. However, this does highlight how loyal he is, at least to the one person he cares about, because he doesn't, you know, leaving you and the rest of your team thus and will keep the little puppet to keep you company. What a freaking douchebag. But anyway, it also brings to light how selfish and oblivious Zhain is. since Rashawn doesn't want to kill Aforal, which he has the power to do, and that, you know, Aforal basically wants to die, but Rashawn still won't kill him, means that he's letting a mass murderer get away with crimes because of how selfish he is. That instead of sparing the entire universe, he spares the most evil person because he loves him. Which, I mean, you're allowed to love a person, but I mean, I think if they're killing, you know, the entire universe, then you probably shouldn't like this person anymore. I mean, that's just my opinion, but oh well, back to the actual point of this whole video essay. I tend to get a little bit lost here. This shows that Rashawn is also pretty delusional. As Aforal says, but you cling to the silly belief that this will all turn to good someday. Or, you know, something along the lines of that, I don't really care. Which is basically Aforal saying, nuh-uh, bruh, I will always be bad, and you're crazy delusional think that I could be good one day. Love Aforal over this. To take note of his obliviousness, the reason why everything happens in the game is because he practically is oblivious to the fact that what he's doing isn't good because he's too focused on how he feels. He's oblivious to the people around him. He basically has main character syndrome without being explicitly stated, or at least that's how I felt about it anyway. I mean, the dude only thinks about himself for God's sake, so he thinks the world revolves around him. But anyway, it's actually something that makes his personality a lot more interesting from the other characters, and then, you know, it might sound like I'm hating on him, but I think it does actually make his character more interesting. Whereas all the other members on the team can be described as selfless to some extent, Rashawn is very selfish and a very flawed person. This interesting personality just goes to show that the characters in Sea of Stars do have personalities and that prove to be different from each other. Rashawn has a lot of negative personality traits, however, it does make him an interesting character. He has more traits, but I would be here all day if I listed them all. Rashawn may have a flawed personality, but it's still one, and I think in terms of personalities in general, it makes it a good one. It's interesting. But now, what about Beast, a result of Rashawn choosing not to be so goddamn selfish for once? To add to the personality of Sea of Stars characters, we have Beast. While showing up late in the game, Beast is shown to be resilient and someone who is always ready to show his value. After all, Beast needs unbreakable will in order to move his living glass body that Rashawn provides to him. Like I said, the one good thing Rashawn does. So, he is also excited to show the Solstice Warriors what he could do and even shocks Rashawn. When you first get him on your team, he says how he feels it is an honor to fight alongside Valir and Zhain. This also brings up how polite Beast is, as he constantly says how it is an honor to fight with them. And when you do the arena side quest of Beast, he asks very politely if they have time to go to the arena in the first place, and is so grateful and excited once you go there. Much like Garl, he's a bundle of joy. But something that does separate from Garl is how Garl acts more on his impulse with his jolly mood, but Beast gives more personal space, basically. As Beast does show up very late in the game, you don't have much time to bond with him, especially if you don't go to the arena. So it is understandable to miss some of these traits about Beast. So basically, I won't berate you if you say that Beast is just a replacement for Garl, as at first glance it can seem that way, I'm not gonna lie. But he does have his own character despite the similarities, kinda like Valir and Zhain. Beast is also very excited to just finally get out of his prison, which was made by Aforal, you know, the worst person in the world that Rashawn still loves, and more jabs at Rashawn. So, one of these more important character traits is that he longs to find his purpose, of which is why he is so grateful to be able to help the group. And in order to avenge the loss of his friends after Aforal tortured Beast and his people. Overall, Beast proves to be a determined and hardworking member of the team that is also able to find the little joys of life. For example, if you treat him to the hot tub in Mirth, he enjoys watching the water splash around from the inside of his glass body despite not being able to feel the warmth of it. Now, the last member on the team to bring up is Garl, someone who I have mentioned many times throughout this video, and is probably my favorite character in Sea of Stars. Differently from all the other characters in Sea of Stars, Garl gets his biggest critique from basically being too much of a jolly dude and being super outgoing, which is what I love about Garl. However, more accurately, they don't like Garl because of how much he steals the show. While it may be true, there is a pretty good reason for this before going over his, his whole character personality or whatever. The reason why he acts the way he does is because he's a speaker for our two main characters who don't really know how to socialize very well. So while they do the whole saving the world thing, Garl is their guide to aid them on their quest, at first defeating Dwellers, and then the Fleshmancer and Arlena. Another reason is probably because they want to make the impact of when he dies that much more upsetting. Let's just say it worked on me. I saw like every time I play that game and every time I revive him, but it doesn't matter. I still cry. With that out of the way, I can now explain the parts of Garl's character that do just go past being happy and go lucky. While obviously being a very outgoing character, this also leads to the more micro details of his grand personality that just makes him all the better. Despite always putting on a smile, there are a few times throughout the game where Garl realizes the world ain't all sunshines and rainbows. This happens the moment when the pirates, Sarai's crew, talk about Lucent Island and how depressing it is there because of the Dweller of Woe. Here we actually see Garl's usually cheery smile fade and become a bit sad for a moment as he realizes the pain that these people are going through and that this adventure won't just be a good hangout with his friends. I think it goes to show that Garl does have a deeper character than just being positive. He isn't one-dimensional. Furthermore, something about Garl that's a bit silly is that he basically has ADHD brain, which is why he's so compulsive when the team does something. Like, when they go to choose a seashell that will make them brave underwater, Garl gets real excited. He's like, oh my god, I want to choose a seashell or whatever. And it's actually such an adorable moment. I love it. However, this doesn't mean Garl can't be serious. During the fight against the Dweller of Woe, Moraine tasked him with finding a way to let more solar eclipse light through the roof. When he gets assigned this task, Garl locks in and immediately comes up with a plan. Long story short, he does succeed. Once again, his compulsion can lead him to making decisions in order to protect his friends, even if it costs pain or his entire life. His caring attitude and outgoing personality is often beneficial, but does come with a price. Something that I find cool about this is that it makes a clear-cut difference between him and Zhain. Garl is selfless, while Zhain is selfish. The same could be said of Forel too. Garl's selflessness gives him the courage to face anything in his way, even in dire circumstances like against the Dweller of Strife. The Dweller of Strife fight also brings a time when we see Garl start to crack again. When Garl and Sarai are pleading with Zhain to help Valier and Zale after the Dweller of Strife knocks down the tower they were fighting on and destroys the only thing that would allow Valier and Zale to win the fight, Zhain doesn't do anything and says how he is bound by his code for Forel and is not allowed to touch the Dweller. Here we see Garl get mad for once and actually tell Zhain that none of what he's doing is fair. And he actually likes Zhain hella a lot. He always says how cool he is. And with the Dawn of Equinox update, when they do the little dab up thing to go fast or whatever, Garl gives Zhain this big ass bear hug, which I find wild. But not only do we see Zhain being the worst once again, but more importantly we see Garl's positivity go away for a moment. This anger stays up until the moment he tries to comfort Valier and Zale, who are crying because Garl is on borrowed time, and no matter what will die in the end. This is after he got shot by the Fleshmancer because the Fleshmancer trying to shoot Valier and Zale, but then Garl hopped in and protect them because he loves his friends. But basically, Garl isn't necessarily positive just because he is, but because he wants other people to feel happy. Garl's main characteristic is that he is empathetic for everybody around him, which is why he stays strong until the end to make sure his friends know they are going to be just fine. Garl's empathy is a trait that goes further than just his positivity, because his empathy is the reason he commits to his actions. Also, Garl has balls when it comes to showing a Forel who's boss, as he should, because, Zhain isn't putting his boyfriend in place, so somebody has to. But just because Garl's a jolly dude doesn't mean he can't get upset, and I love that. It reminds me of SpongeBob from, the earlier episodes where, he actually crashes out at Mr. Krabs or somebody else, and that just makes me laugh so much. The final main character I want to talk about that is not even on your team is a Forel. While not being in the game much himself, the 2 times you see the character interact with a Forel reveals a lot about his personality, and I think, as a character, he's kinda slept on. A Forel actually has one of the most noticeable personalities in the game. He's a mirror image of Garl, and it's honestly such a treat to watch. I really wish he was in the game more because the Forel is actually such a good character. What is so interesting about his personality and something that I love is how he tries to act like typical villain, all condescending and shit like that. But in the moment he gets pissed off or loses at something or whatever, like when you beat his ass in the true ending, he reverts to 16-year-old bully mentality. And it's just so funny to me. This is when he deals with Garl or when he talks to Zhain and gets crazy sassy. And not only is it just funny to me, but it shows how his personality is basically if he took outgoing and made it evil. On a side note, I love how he basically just tells Zhain that his evilness is not just a phase. He shows down the idea of immediately of him possibly ever being good, and continues his monologue where he calls out Zhain on all his shit. Basically saying, bro, you could literally kill me right now, and you won't because you believe it's just a phase. Like I said, basically, this is a quadrillion-year-old man with the personality of a 16-year-old. But overall, a Forel absolutely devours that argument. because he knows all this fight will do is leave him with the equivalent of a slap on the wrist. Although another detail that is super interesting in this moment is that he actually has respect for Zhain here, which is super interesting as it shows his less commanding side. He is mesmerized by Zhain's time stars and even acknowledges Zhain as a superior artist. However, much like I said, he doesn't hold back on the insults either. They fight just like a married couple, and it has me so dead, honestly. Like, I love it so much. Like, this guy is so sassy, and I love him so much for that. But seriously, it shows just how quick-witted he is, a similar trait to Sarai. It's just so funny to me that he could go from being condescending to the Solstice Warriors to killing a kid because he called him a loser and then having the audacity to laugh about it. His personality is a pompous or supercilious, shown by the condescendingness of his tone, and for one, he has his super sassy moments. However, he is truly a bad guy, and has his moments of complete seriousness as well. The first thing I want to go over, technically second, is when you beat the game for the first time or without reviving Garl. Instead of fighting the Fleshmancer, you fight a transformed Erlina, who only seeks to destroy you. As Aforel summons her, he puts on his condescending, whole shenanigans or whatever, and after beating the second phase of the boss fight, where the fight ends, we actually see Aforel do something that isn't taunting people and try to just be, normal amounts of typical villain condescending. This time, Aforel is being extremely serious, and we see just how villainous Aforel is firsthand. Aforel kills Erlina after seeing the Solstice Warriors and the rest beat her. He's actually pretty haunting at this moment and shows no remorse for any of his actions. I mean, this is after he said that Erlina has all this potential or whatever to be this great fighter or whatever. He just immediately kills her. And I mean, he's a villain. He should be haunting like that. He could seem like objectively silly at times, or, immature for his age. Like, bro only chooses to fight you when you save Garl because he has beef with him after Garl called him a loser. He's beef with, this, 16-year-old kid, maybe 18-year-old, and, that's just wild. Like I said, immature and slightly humorous. But he proves at the same time to actually be genuinely threatening. However, in this moment, you did technically beat the Fleshmancer, causing Zhain to appear from a portal to say that Aforel needs to follow the rules and thus leave Sarai's world and the Solstice Warriors' worlds forever. Once again, we see Aforel being condescending, but this time putting his crude humor in it. Probably because Zhain's there and he wants to show off to Zhain. He says he wants to watch the Solstice Warriors see the big surprise, where it turns out there are hundreds of world eaters, dwellers that have been left to gain power for too long, that Valier and Zhain need to leave in order to defeat them. But basically, the reason I brought up this moment is because it reinforces what we already knew about Aforel, and how while he can seem less serious sometimes, especially with Zhain, is actually quite a serious threat with his immense power, as he has a sassy, condescending, serious, and evil personality that he could use to his advantage. Some kind of new character traits I haven't brought up yet about him are his very oblivious and perfectionistic mindset, which I find pretty interesting for him. As shown throughout Sea Stars, Aforel gets tricked twice, once by, I don't know how to pronounce this kid's name, I apologize, Kale, the little 10-year-old boy that's 100 years old or whatever, and he's the main one out of the group, that one, I just don't know how to pronounce his name, and the other time between Beast and his people. Both groups either find some way to delay his evil shenanigans, or build a last-ditch effort that would help somebody stop him, in this case it being you, as the Solstice Warriors. Now, considering Aforel is actually a very smart dude within the lore, you would think that he would kind of notice this stuff, but instead he's crazy oblivious because, let's be real, he probably thinks that somebody like the kids or Beasts aren't intelligent enough to be able to trick him, so he doesn't even think to look. Even still, you would think that if he saw two of his projects go slightly astray, he would start thinking something's up, but he just doesn't do that, and it's actually one of Aforel's greatest faults. However, to elaborate on his perfectionistic mindset I mentioned, he actually seems to feel disappointed in his own work at times. This is another thing that's easy to miss, as it requires you to get at least one of the weapons from the Fleshmancer's tower, and go into the description of the weapon and reading it, which is something that you could easily just do by equipping the weapon, but it's still a harder trait to find in Aforel. But to actually get at what I'm trying to say, when you read the description, it mentions how Aforel threw the flask out after trying to make one as good and as powerful as Zhain's, but viewed the result as inadequate, and that's the reason he threw it out. It's similar with the other weapons that can be found as well. Take this plus his acknowledgement that Zhain is better than him in certain ways, someone who always feels that their work is disappointing. Now this may seem like point at straws, however, this is what brings out Aforel's jealousy. To cope with this, Aforel, in a most horrible way, treats others like dog shit to make himself feel superior in comparison to other people. The most prominent example of this is when you go to acquire Rashawn's vial of time for him. Rashawn already knows that Aforel set up some kind of puzzle that involves a statue to get it, so you immediately know where it's located. The puzzle is very simple, as it just involves rotating pieces to make a picture that activates a way for you to get the vial. However, the important part here is what the picture is of. It can be kind of hard to see, but this picture is of Aforel legit stepping on Rashawn to try and show that he is superior, when in reality, he feels the complete opposite, as he expressed before, and is just jealous. On a side note, the disrespect from that picture is bonkers. Absolutely insane. Like, bro, I'm pretty sure you shouldn't treat your boyfriend like that, but, I mean, that's just my opinion. But I find all of these moments I mentioned just show his personality, as it reveals, obviously, of how horrible of a guy he is. His condescendingness, sassiness, obliviousness, and finally his perfectionistic mindset, although he is quick to point out something when he likes and compliments it. It's just interesting to me. I find it interesting that for as terrible as a guy he is, I mean, he literally gets no excuses for anything he does, despite being fully evil, still likes Rashawn. It's not like he became evil and stopped liking Rashawn. No, in fact, he even damn near killed an entire species of bird people, all to give Rashawn the power of natural flight as a birthday gift. That's, genuinely insane levels of simping. I don't think anybody else would go that far. But, yeah, great, cool. Aforel did that. So, I think a good way to explain Aforel's personality in a simplified way is that if you take one aspect of all the team members, combine it into one, and then make it evil. Aforel is a prime example of how Sea of Stars characters not only have personalities, but interesting ones. This is all I'll go through the main characters, but I still want to go over quickly to side characters that are still important, but not like the main characters. I think everyone forgets about the fun personalities of some of the other NPCs. Some of them are really great and give the game some of its charm. The first one I want to talk about is Ramaya, who makes me die laughing every time she makes an appearance. Her personality overall is just being irritated and all the time being miserable, but crazy expressive and has a bold sense of fashion. Miserable part may not sound that fun, but the way she expresses herself is so funny. She basically points out all this stuff that you wouldn't think about, but once said honestly makes a lot of sense. For example, when you meet Ramaya for the first time, she points out that the team has no right to break into her house, cause a mess, and start making demands. While the group is there to get a stone that will save Carl's life, Ramaya does bring up a good point. She technically didn't do anything to you, but reacted so pissed off immediately. Then after you beat her, because of course she's going to fight you, she's pissed. I don't know what you would expect. She gives up and just gets mad at them all over again, and it's so funny. She hates being disrespected, and because of this, talks to herself saying, the nerve, the disrespect, the coarseness! And she is just, like, so oblivious to the fact that she probably did overreact just a little bit, and that she is probably the one being slightly disrespectful, but is still understandably mad, and I love Ramaya so much for that. Top tier personality, honestly. The second person I want to talk about is Malcolmud. I love Malcolmud so much, and feel so bad for him. He's basically just like this poor little kid who gets bullied by kids and adults of his town, because he just wants to have fun with the rest of his community. But he has like these magical powers or whatever, so they can't let him do that. He also has a pet called Rocky, and is very gentle when it comes to her, and will come to her defense. The reason he is bullied is because, like I said, he has elemental powers that allow him to terraform the ground around him, but because of this, everyone says Malcolmud can't dig, and then they have the audacity to say that he's lazy because when he doesn't dig, he gets made fun of for it. Malcolmud is basically just a very sweet child having to deal with an overreactive town where even the town elder makes fun of him. But Garl helps him out because he's the GOAT. And after that, Malcolmud becomes very friendly. Overall, Malcolmud is a sweet little munchkin who just adores his pet Rocky and has the balls to stand up for himself. I love this little dude so much, you have no clue. I die of cuteness every time he comes on screen. He's the best. The third character I want to talk about in this section is Teeks. Teeks is a huge dork in a very good way, who loves history and lore. She is a constant thirst for knowledge and has an admirable obsession with any little artifact she can manage to get her hands on. A fun fact about Teeks is that she's actually based on a member of the community who documented every little tidbit of lore to a wiki fan site who goes by the name of Soleil. Basically, I know all the lore of the entire Sabotage universe thanks to her, so thanks Soleil. This is also the reason why Teeks has pink hair, by the way, because it's a little ode to her, basically. Soleil has pink hair, so that's why they gave Teeks pink hair. Teeks is also a bit introverted, but opens up a lot when it comes to history. Lastly, I want to go over the pirates, Yolanda, Valtrade, and Keenathan. I love how goofy they are, but what an important and supportive group they are to the team. Yolanda is basically the little ringleader out of all three who talks in RPG references with everything being her middle name. She actually does have all of the middle names she mentions, by the way. I love her slight little character development when she gets dressed up for the Golden Pelican and says that Fancy isn't her middle name. It gave me a good laugh. She's also very keen to get the show on the road. Keenathan is basically some dude who always just says how if blank, his name wouldn't be Keenathan. But he's always excited for Pirates Adventures. The DLC trailers also reveals that his name isn't Keenathan, by the way, so if you think Keenathan is weird, that's probably why. With Valstrid, he's just a silly dude who is actually pretty friendly and could do hella stuff thanks to his magical shirt that makes him, like, super buff or whatever. It makes me laugh. But overall, the pirate crew is just meant to be a bunch of silly little characters that will put a smile on your face and will always be ready for an adventure and helping people out. As I previously mentioned, many people have gripes with Sea of Stars and its characters by saying that they have no personality or even being too much in the spotlight like Garl. However, I just don't think this is true. As throughout the game of Sea of Stars, the characters not only have personality, but a wide range of personalities. First we have Valier, who is proven to be confident, upfront, and mostly go with the flow. Then we have Zhain, who is generally optimistic, has intense emotions, and brave. We also have Garl, who is a beam of light for our heroes in order to communicate with the rest of the world on the Solstice Warriors' behalf. And he's empathetic to his friends, impulsive, but also shouldn't have other emotions than just happiness. Next is Sarai, who could be a bit impatient, irritable, and slow to trust others, and also impulsive. But she's always determined and has the best intentions for her friends, as showed by her caring actions. There's Zhain as well, who has an interesting personality because he's possibly the most imperfect character of the group. He could be selfish, oblivious, and even a little egotistical, whether he realizes it or not, but that just makes him all the more interesting. Or there's Beast, somebody who's always respectful, resilient, and looking to prove himself. Sea of Stars also has an amazing villain, who is the perfect mix of being sassy and condescending, who's also a little bit of a perfectionist. Lastly, there are the fun side characters who always bring charm to the game in their own way. All of these combined show that Sea of Stars characters do have character. I just want to give a big thanks to Sabotage for making, like, 2 of my favorite games of all time if they, actually, end up watching this video and see this or whatever. But, like, literally, I usually don't want to write an entire essay just because I want to prove why something is good, but this game made me do that. These games have made me feel, like, so happy and actually helped inspire my love for drawing and being determined to get better. The games have so much love and thought and care put into every pixel that is placed. I can't wait to see what you guys have in store for the future. I also want to give a big thanks to everyone who actually sticks around to the very end, and even if you just clicked on this video in the first place, it really makes my day. And on a side note, some of my interpretations of the characters might be wrong or just something you disagree with, and that's okay. It's okay to have your own opinions on things, and I just want to say thank you all for watching. Have a nice day.